Hi guys, my name is Emily. I'm a second year A-level student studying A-levels in politics, English literature and music. I've been making videos on YouTube for the last year on A-level politics, so there are plenty of other things down below if you check my channel. Now this video is concentrated on nationalism, which is one of the optional non-core ideologies which are part of paper 2 in EdExcel's A-level politics course. I'm going to split this video into 4 distinct sections. I'm going to talk about liberal nationalism, conservative nationalism, expansionism and anti or post-colonialism. And including in those 4, we are going to talk about the 5 key thinkers, which are Rousseau, Mazzini, Herder, Maurras and Garvey. Let's go. So, there we go. So, liberal nationalism. So this came from the Enlightenment period, which is essentially where people got rid, eventually, over many years, we got rid of monarchies in England, absolute monarchies, in order to have democracies. And liberal nationalism is also heavily inspired by the French Revolution. So again, it's the rejection of hereditary monarchy for a democratic government. It focuses on independent nation states. It's inclusive, it's rational because of the self-determination factor. It's progressive, arguably, because it promotes democracy. It is interdependent, so it promotes things like the EU. And it is multicultural, so diversity, pluralism and tolerance. Now, there are 2 liberal thinkers that you guys should probably know about, liberal nationalist thinkers. The first one is Rousseau, who talked about the general will, which is the idea that the people are sovereign, and civic nationalism, which means that the sovereignty of a nation is based on the participation of said citizens. So the next liberal nationalist key thinker is Mazzini. So he supported representative democracy, but he put the interest of the nation above the interest of the individual. So he had this thing called Young Italy, which was trying to overthrow hereditary monarchies. However, he does sort of cross into conservative nationalism in the fact that views are a lot more romantic. So the idea of spiritual invisible forces holding society together, which is more of a conservative nationalist viewpoint, which brings us on to conservative nationalism. So this is all about maintaining social order and defending tradition. It's all about a common culture and history. It's backward looking, the idea that the past nation was strong, unified and dominant, and this sort of idealised looking through rose-tinted glasses at the past. It's exclusive, it's irrational due to its emotional connection. It's superstitious, so they're superstitious of supranational bodies like the EU because they can be flawed and unstable. They are monocultural, meaning one culture. So cultural diversity leads to instability and conflict, and they can also be xenophobic. So this is about imperialism and colonialism. Radical nationalism and fascism also come under this category, so for example Nazism, and nativism also comes under this category, so places like North Korea, USA and China. So Herder is our first conservative nationalist, who believed in common language being at the centre of culture, and he called this group of people the Volksgeist. He was very prominent in the reunification of Germany in about 1871-ish, at a time where Germany was very, very split into separate states. and again, the romantic emotional idealism. So Moraz is more of an ultra-conservative who's anti-democracy and pro-hereditary monarchy, believes in the chauvinism of French people, so French people are the best, we are the superior race, all that kind of thing. Integral nationalism, close to Hitler in terms of fascism, but definitely not a supporter of Hitler. Very important to mention that. Extreme, so like integral nationalism, racism and anti-Semitism can be associated with Moraz. Authoritarianism and patriotism and the restoration of the past. Which kind of brings us on to expansionism. So expansionism is sort of like a more radical version of conservative nationalism. So expansionism is chauvinistic, which is basically the superiority of your nation over other nations. It is racial, so for example, Nazi Germany and anti-Semitism. It has militarianism, which is hard to say, but the belief that the military creates this glory. It's about negative integration, so there has to be a them to hate in order for there to be an us. So othering to create separate entities. Pan-nationalism can also come into this. The expansionists don't really respect the sovereignty of other nation states, unlike liberal nationalists. So you could say that Russian nationalism under Putin is expansionist. Expansionism is also irrational and exclusive. It is regressive and reactionary, and also imperialist. Now, there are no key thinkers for expansionism, unfortunately. Which leads us on to our last section, which is anti or post-colonialism. So this essentially, what I like to think of, because this took me a little while to figure out what this meant, but what I like to think of is Britain used to have this massive empire, and essentially people got a bit fed up of it and wanted the colonisation to go away. So that would be anti-colonialism. And post-colonialism is how do we develop a sense of nationhood after being run by another country for so many years. So anti and post-colonialism is opposed to colonial rule and wish to return governance of the nation back to the native population. Sometimes they link with socialism in order to combat economic imperialism from international capitalism. So, for example, the creation of Marxist-Leninist states like Africa. So all about nation building and self-preservation, particularly via the leadership, for example, Gandhi in India. Prominent in African and Asian states, also including pan-nationalism in this one. So pan-nationalist states could be argued to be like USA and South Africa. The idea of like a leadership cult. And other things like religion, so Gaddafi in Libya, and ethnicity and culture. Now, under this one, you could put Garvey. Now, Garvey is a black nationalist. So he was a Jamaican who was concerned with Africa and wanted to sort of create, so it's a pan-nationalism, wanted to create a sense of nationalism across all of the different states in Africa. So imperialism was the main obstacle. And Ethiopia, he believed, was a place that all black people came from, which creates this idea of a common ancestry. And he believed that in the idea of black consciousness. Brilliant. So now we've gone through all of these 4 different sections. Now we're going to do 3 sort of key arguments that came from the textbook. If you guys are curious, and I have had a few comments about this, this is the textbook I've been using for the ideologies, and it's the same version, but obviously with different topics that I've been using for US and UK. And if you give me a second to reach over, This is a textbook I've been using. I got it from the EdExcel website. It is really, really cool, and it contains literally everything on every single topic you will need to know, without having to have like loads of different revision guides. Anyway, back to nationalism. So is nationalism progressive or regressive? Well, in some ways it is progressive. So liberal nationalists promote democracy, tolerance and liberty, and liberal nationalists and socialist nationalists think that there is a force for progress by uniting people around common values. And liberal nationalists and Republicans believe that freedom of the nation is freedom of the individual. They believe that they are synonymous. However, they can be seen as regressive because conservative nationalists seek to recreate a golden era from the past, which prevents further development. Now, this is a problem with Japanese nationalism when it came to World War II. As well as this, conservative nationalism is seen as defensive and xenophobic. And so it sacrifices progress in order of militarianism and isolationism, e.g. Donald Trump. Radical forms often exclude the inferior groups, so like Nazism. And the rise of nativism threatens economic process by inhibiting trade and losing the efficiency that comes from competition. Another key argument is conservative nationalism expansionist? So the arguments for yes could be that many conservative nationalist movements have practiced imperialism, which serves the interest of the nation and arises from cultural superiority. Conservative nationalism promotes militarianism and conquest, and there is an inevitability of rivalry with other states, which leads to conflict. However, it is not expansionist because nativism is the literal opposite of expansionist. Modern conservative nationalists usually are Democrats and respect the interdependency and the independency of other nations. And hang on. So expansionistic nationalism was a historical form which has now largely disappeared due to things like globalization. So how close is the link between nationalism and race? So one argument is that they're closely linked. So most nationalists claim some kind of ethnicity identity which binds people together. There is a link to fascism and race. And race has been used to differentiate one nation from other nations. And many nationalists trace their history back to one ancestral group. For example, the Jews are the original people of Israel. However, you could argue that there is no intrinsic link. Many nations are multi-ethnic. So, for example, Britain, right here, we are a multi-ethnic society. And even when common ethnicity is relevant, it has had little impact on most nationalistic movements. And liberal nationalists are less interested in race and more interested in the shared values such as democracy. Well done, guys. If you guys have made it this far, well done. You should congratulate yourself. As I'm filming this, it is Thursday, and our first exam is on Monday. So it's not long to go, but if you guys are still struggling on topics, you still have time to revise them. Really, at this point, I would advise everyone to be doing lots of exam practice. I have got a video on breakdown of the exams and like a brief overview of how to answer each question. I have had a few comments asking me if I can do like how to write a 24-mark answer, like the structure of it. The problem is I don't really feel like I'm qualified to answer that. There's no right or wrong way to write an essay, particularly with subjects like politics. As long as you're addressing the question and being like relevant to the question and using all the tips that I put in that other video, you should be fine. But unfortunately there's no set, it's not like GCSEs where you can essentially do like PE in every paragraph, write 6 paragraphs and you're done. It's not as simple as that. But if you guys have any other questions, please leave them down in the comments. And if you guys have any corrections to the stuff in this video, then again, please leave them down in the comments. We're all trying to get through this together, but I promise we can get through it in the end. I'm very, very proud of every single one of you that has been watching these videos and commenting on them and helping each other out. Thank you so, so much for all being part of this amazing little community we've got going on here. And I wish you all the best of luck for your exams. Goodbye.